I never imagined it would start like this, in the middle of a storm, with a man pretending to be poor," Sarah Williams thought as she stood at the entrance of the Grand Hotel ballroom, holding a tray full of champagne flutes. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, and the rain poured down in sheets, but inside, everything was pristine, bright, and excessively elegant. She was used to the glitz and glamour of Manhattan's elite, but tonight, it felt different. The chatter of well-dressed guests filled the air as they mingled, their conversations a mix of business and pleasure. Sarah, on the other hand, was just another face in the crowd, her black uniform blending in among the high-end suits and sparkling dresses. She wasn't here for the luxury, but to earn enough money to finish her nursing degree. That's when she saw him. He wasn't like the other guests. The man who had been watching her from the corner of the room had an air about him that sent a chill down her spine. He wore a simple, yet expensive, black suit that fit him perfectly, and his hair was styled in a way that seemed effortless, but undeniably attractive. His sharp features and pale blue eyes stood out in a way that seemed almost too intense. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't just another wealthy man at a charity gala. There was something about him that screamed power, control, and danger. He was someone who didn't need to speak loudly to command attention. He simply did. She continued to serve drinks, her heart racing every time her eyes wandered to where he stood, talking to a group of guests, yet always keeping his gaze on her. It was as if he could sense her every move. She tried to brush it off, telling herself she was being paranoid, but as the night went on, she couldn't help but feel like he was waiting for something. As if he knew something about her. The tension in the room suddenly grew thicker as she made her way to the back to refill her tray. She caught a glimpse of him again. This time, his eyes met hers. For a brief moment, everything else faded away. The sound of the music, the chatter of the guests, it all disappeared. It was just the two of them. His gaze was unwavering, penetrating. Sarah felt the air in the room shift as he took a step toward her, his movements calculated, purposeful. She felt her breath catch in her throat. He was coming toward her, slowly, deliberately, like a predator who had spotted his prey. Her legs froze as he finally reached her side. "Excuse me," he said, his voice smooth and calm, but there was something beneath it, something that made her stomach turn. "I couldn't help but notice something about you." Sarah felt her pulse race as she tried to compose herself, afraid to look him in the eye. "What's that?" she managed to ask, her voice barely a whisper. "That necklace," he said, his gaze dropping to the silver chain around her neck. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She had worn the necklace for as long as she could remember. It was simple, nothing special, but to her, it was a reminder of everything she had lost. "Where did you get it?" His question was sharp, and Sarah suddenly felt exposed. She instinctively reached up to touch the pendant, feeling a strange wave of anxiety wash over her. I bought it a long time ago," she stammered, but his eyes didn't leave hers. Something about his expression made her feel like he didn't believe her. He studied her for a long moment before speaking again. "You're lying," he said simply, his voice cool and confident. "I know exactly where you got that necklace." Sarah's blood ran cold. She opened her mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. His gaze lingered on her, studying every inch of her, as if he were trying to decipher her soul. For a moment, she wondered if he could see through her. See the fear, the secrets she had buried deep inside. "Tell me the truth," he said, stepping even closer, his voice a low murmur. "Where did you really get it?" Sarah's hands trembled as she quickly dropped her gaze to the necklace she'd worn for years. The silver chain, simple but meaningful, had always been her silent companion, a reminder of her past. She could feel his intense gaze on her, as if his eyes were peeling back the layers of her soul. The room seemed to grow quieter, despite the murmurs of the crowd still swirling around them. Luca's voice cut through the noise like a knife. "You know," he said, his tone dark and knowing, "you're not fooling me." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she stood frozen, her mind racing. She had never imagined a moment like this. It was as if she had stumbled into a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. He was too perceptive, too sure of himself. She had no idea how he had figured it out, but she felt exposed. I don't know what you mean," Sarah replied, her voice unsteady. She could feel the panic creeping up her throat, threatening to choke her. Luca's eyes never left hers. His expression was calm, yet there was an undercurrent of something more. Something dangerous. "You're lying, Sarah," he said again, this time more firmly. His voice had a quiet authority that made her blood run cold. "I know exactly where you got that necklace, and it's not from some thrift shop like you said." Sarah swallowed hard, the words stuck in her throat. She tried to look away, but his gaze held her captive. She started, but he raised a hand to stop her. "No need to explain," he said, his voice smooth and controlled. "I already know." She felt a chill run down her spine as he stepped even closer, his presence overwhelming. He was so tall, his broad frame towering over her, yet he moved with such precision, such confidence. "You're not just a simple waitress, are you?" Luca asked, his eyes flickering briefly to her uniform, then back to her face. "You're hiding something, something big." Sarah could barely breathe. How could he know? She was just an ordinary woman, struggling to make ends meet, trying to finish her nursing degree. How could she possibly have anything in common with someone like him? Luca, the Mafia boss, the man who commanded rooms with a glance, who had eyes that could pierce through a person's very soul. "I don't know what you're talking about," she whispered, shaking her head. "I'm just trying to get by." Luca didn't say anything for a long moment. He just studied her, as if weighing her every word. Sarah could feel the tension building, thickening the air between them. She didn't know what to do. Part of her wanted to run, to get as far away from him as possible. But another part of her, the part she couldn't quite explain, wanted to stay. "You're lying," Luca said again, his voice low but filled with an undeniable certainty. "But that's okay. We'll get to the truth eventually. I always get what I want, Sarah." The way he said her name sent a shiver through her. She didn't know why, but it felt like he had known her for far longer than they had actually met. She could feel her legs weaken, and for a brief moment, she thought she might actually collapse right there. But she stood her ground, staring up at him. She couldn't let him see how much he had rattled her. "I don't want any part of this," she said, forcing herself to sound more confident than she felt. "Whatever you think you know, you're wrong." Luca smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was a smile that made Sarah's heart skip a beat, a smile that sent a cold thrill down her spine. "We'll see about that," he murmured, turning away from her, his gaze lingering on her for just a moment longer. As he walked away, Sarah felt the weight of his words settle over her like a dark cloud. She didn't know what he wanted from her, but she knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. And somehow, she had a feeling it was just the beginning. The next few days felt like a blur for Sarah. The moment Luca had left the gala, she thought it was over. But somehow, she couldn't shake the feeling that he was still watching her. She tried to go back to her routine, serving drinks at other events, trying to keep her head down and her thoughts on her studies. But each time she closed her eyes, she saw his icy blue eyes staring at her, studying her as if he could see right through her. It was unnerving. Every time she passed a mirror, she caught her reflection, feeling as though something about her had changed. Luca's words echoed in her mind. "I always get what I want." It wasn't just a statement. It felt like a promise. She hadn't realized how much those words had stuck with her, until she found herself glancing over her shoulder more often than usual. She started to avoid places she normally frequented, certain that he would appear at any moment. But no matter how much she tried to escape, fate seemed determined to pull them back together. One afternoon, she was walking out of her small apartment building when she saw a black car parked outside. Her heart skipped a beat, her steps faltering for just a moment. There, standing by the car, was Luca. He was leaning against the sleek vehicle, his arms crossed, his gaze focused on her, as if he'd been waiting. "Sarah," he said with a calm that sent a chill down her spine. His voice was too smooth, too sure of itself. She took a step back, instinctively wanting to distance herself. "What do you want?" she asked, trying to sound firm, though her voice quivered slightly. "I think you already know," Luca replied. "I've been looking for you." The words felt heavy, as though they held more meaning than she could understand. "Why?" she whispered, still trying to piece everything together. "Why have you been following me?" Luca pushed off the car and took a step toward her, his expression softening, just slightly, but enough to make her hesitate. "I'm not following you, Sarah," he said. "I'm giving you a choice." She stared at him, confused. "A choice? You know exactly what I mean." He leaned in closer, his presence overwhelming. "The necklace. The connection. You have something that belongs to me, and I want it back." Sarah swallowed hard. The truth was, she didn't even understand what he was talking about. All she knew was that she had been caught in a web she didn't even know existed. A web that Luca was somehow pulling tighter around her with every passing second. "I told you, I don't know what you're talking about," she said, though she could feel the doubt creeping into her voice. Luca's lips curved into a knowing smile. "We'll see about that." He stepped back, pulling out a business card and handing it to her. "I'm staying at the Ritz. Come by when you're ready to talk. I'll be waiting." He turned without another word, heading toward his car. Sarah stood there for a long moment, the card in her hand feeling like a weight. She didn't know why, but the idea of going to see him, to face whatever was coming, made her feel like she was slowly walking toward a dangerous truth that she might not be able to escape. She tucked the card into her pocket and walked inside, her mind spinning. What was she supposed to do now? There was no denying that Luca knew something she didn't. And she couldn't keep running forever. She didn't know what he wanted, but she was about to find out. The following day, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the card Luca had given her. She kept it tucked safely in her bag, yet the weight of it felt unbearable. It wasn't just the idea of meeting him again. It was the realization that whatever this was, whatever he knew about her, it was far bigger than she ever could have imagined. She knew she had no real reason to trust him, but something inside her told her that avoiding him wasn't an option. So, after another restless night of tossing and turning, Sarah found herself standing outside the Ritz, staring at the entrance as the afternoon sun dipped lower in the sky. She felt like a pawn in a game she didn't understand, yet every instinct she had told her she needed to find out what Luca wanted. The heavy doors of the hotel opened before her, and a wave of cool air rushed out to greet her, the polished marble floors gleaming under the soft lighting. She made her way to the front desk, her heart pounding in her chest. "Can I help you, miss?" the receptionist asked, her tone polite but impersonal. "I'm here to see Mr. Romano," Sarah said, forcing her voice to remain steady. The receptionist raised an eyebrow but didn't question her. Instead, she picked up the phone and spoke in hushed tones for a moment before nodding and gesturing toward the elevator. "You're expected, Miss Williams. The penthouse floor." Sarah swallowed, nodding in return, and made her way to the elevator. She couldn't shake the feeling that every step she took was bringing her deeper into something she didn't fully understand. As the elevator ascended, her reflection in the mirrored walls looked like a stranger. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her. Was she really the same woman who had just been trying to get by, hoping for a normal life? Now, she was stepping into the world of a mafia boss, a man whose past was as mysterious as the intensity of his gaze. The doors slid open, and Sarah stepped into the penthouse suite. The room was as extravagant as she had imagined, filled with plush furniture, rich colors, and an open view of the city skyline. But Luca was nowhere to be seen. She hesitated, unsure of what to do next, but before she could take another step, his voice echoed from behind her. "You came," he said, his tone low and measured. Sarah turned to find him standing by the large windows, his back to her as he gazed out over the city. He was calm, composed, but the tension in the air was undeniable. "I didn't think you would," he continued, his voice carrying a note of approval. "I don't know why I'm here," Sarah admitted, feeling more vulnerable than ever. "But I need to know what you want from me." Luca turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "It's not about what I want from you, Sarah," he said, his eyes locking with hers. "It's about what you need to understand. What you need to know about yourself." Sarah's mind raced. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Luca took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. "You're part of something bigger than you realize. This necklace," he said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out the pendant she had worn for as long as she could remember. "It's a key to a past you've forgotten, and I'm here to help you remember." His words hit her like a wave crashing against the shore, too fast, too powerful to ignore. She didn't know what he meant, but deep down, she felt a strange pull to what he was saying. Something in her gut told her this was the beginning of something that could change everything. "I don't want to be a part of this," she said, her voice shaking despite her best efforts to remain composed. "You don't have a choice," Luca replied, his voice soft but firm. "You've already been pulled in. Now, it's time to understand why." Sarah stood there, trapped between fear and curiosity, unsure of what to do next. But one thing was clear. She was in deeper than she had ever thought possible, and Luca Romano had no intention of letting her go. The game had only just begun. Sarah felt the weight of Luca's words hanging in the air as he stood there, watching her, his presence almost suffocating. The city lights outside twinkled in the distance, a world so far removed from the quiet life she had once known. But here, in this opulent penthouse, it felt like she had stepped into a completely different world, one where nothing was simple, and everything had a hidden meaning. "What do you mean, I've already been pulled in?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking despite her best efforts to remain calm. She felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, not sure if she should step back or jump. Luca stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "You don't even realize it yet," he said, his voice low but filled with certainty. "But your past, your family, it's all tied to mine. And that necklace, it's the key to everything." Sarah swallowed hard, trying to make sense of what he was saying. "I don't understand," she admitted. "How can my past be tied to yours? I don't even know who you really are." Lucas smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that reassured her. It was the kind of smile that made her question everything she thought she knew about herself. "I told you, you're not just some waitress," he said. "You've always been more than that. You just don't remember yet." His words were like pieces of a puzzle, each one leaving her more confused and lost than the last. Sarah had always been told that her mother died in a car accident when she was young, and that her father had struggled with addiction for most of her life. She never knew much about her extended family. But now, standing in front of Luca, it felt like everything was unraveling. "Why should I believe you?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Luca's gaze softened, just a fraction, but his intensity didn't waver. "Because you don't have a choice," he said simply. "You're already in this, whether you like it or not." Sarah felt a sharp pang in her chest. She had always believed she was just a regular woman, trying to survive in a world that didn't care about people like her. But now, Luca was telling her she was part of something much bigger, something she couldn't escape. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice hoarse. Luca took a deep breath, and for a moment, Sarah thought he might answer her with the truth. But instead, he shook his head slowly. "It's not about what I want, Sarah," he said, his tone surprisingly gentle. "It's about what you need to discover about yourself, about your family." Sarah's mind raced. "What do you mean? My family?" she repeated, confusion building in her chest. Luca didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked over to the bar and poured himself a drink, his movements deliberate. "Your family has been hiding from the truth," he said finally, "and you're the key to uncovering it." Sarah shook her head, feeling a headache start to form behind her eyes. "This doesn't make any sense. What truth? What are you talking about?" Luca's expression hardened. "The truth about your heritage, Sarah. The truth about who you really are." He paused, as if letting his words sink in. "You've been living a lie, but now it's time for you to face it." The room felt like it was closing in on her. She couldn't breathe. Everything was too much. Too overwhelming. She wanted to run, to escape from the suffocating feeling that was taking over her chest. But something inside her, the same thing that had driven her to come here in the first place, told her she needed to stay. She needed answers. "I don't know if I can do this," she said quietly, more to herself than to him. Luca looked at her with an unreadable expression. "You don't have a choice, Sarah. You never did." The silence that followed was heavy, thick with unspoken words. Sarah stood there, her mind swirling with confusion, fear, and something else she couldn't quite name. Was it curiosity? Was it the pull of the unknown? Or was it just the feeling that her life was no longer in her control? Whatever it was, it felt like she was standing at the crossroads of her past and her future, with Luca Romano holding the key to everything. And she had no idea what to do next. The days that followed felt like they moved in slow motion for Sarah. Every part of her was on edge, waiting for the moment that would come, the moment when Luca would make her face whatever hidden truth he kept alluding to. The penthouse had been quiet since her meeting with him, and as much as she tried to ignore it, she couldn't stop wondering what he meant by your family and your heritage. She had always been just Sarah Williams, a regular woman working hard to finish school, but now it seemed like there was a whole other life waiting for her, one she didn't even know existed. It felt like a story she wasn't prepared to read. One evening, as she sat in her small apartment, she found herself staring at the pendant she had worn for so many years, the same one Luca had recognized. Her fingers brushed over the silver, the cool metal strangely comforting in her hands. It was just a necklace, wasn't it? She tried to convince herself that there was nothing more to it. But Luca's words kept echoing in her mind. Asterisk. It's the key to everything. Asterisk, the thought sent a chill through her. What if it wasn't just a simple piece of jewelry? What if it was something more? The next day, she couldn't shake the feeling that she needed to go back to Luca, to the penthouse, and finally find out the truth. She didn't know what she was hoping to gain, but something inside her told her that she couldn't run from this any longer. As she walked up to the hotel, the familiar, imposing doors loomed in front of her, and once again, she was stepping into a world that felt nothing like her own. The receptionist greeted her with a nod, recognizing her immediately. "Mr. Romano is expecting you," she said. The elevator ride felt even longer this time, as Sarah felt the weight of her decision. She had no idea what she was about to walk into. The doors opened to the same luxurious penthouse, the same extravagant furnishings. But this time, it felt different. She could almost feel the tension in the air as she stepped inside. Luca was waiting for her, standing by the large window, staring out at the city. He didn't turn as she entered, and for a moment, Sarah wondered if he had expected her all along. "You came back," Luca said, his voice calm, yet with a hint of something more, something almost relieved. Sarah didn't know how to respond. She hadn't come here for any answers, but something about his presence made her feel like she needed to. "I didn't know where else to go," she admitted, her voice soft. "I don't know what you want from me, but I can't keep ignoring you." Luca turned slowly, his piercing blue eyes meeting hers. "I've told you before, Sarah. It's not about what I want. It's about you understanding the truth about who you really are." She took a deep breath. "I don't even know what you mean by that," she said, frustration creeping into her voice. "I'm just me." Luca stepped closer to her, his gaze unwavering. "You are more than just you," he said, his voice low. "Your family has been hiding the truth from you, Sarah. And that necklace," he continued, holding out the pendant. "It's the key to unlocking everything." Sarah hesitated, looking at the necklace, then back at Luca. "What do you want me to do with it?" she asked. Luca's expression softened, but there was still an edge to his words. "You need to remember, Sarah. You need to face the past that was stolen from you. And once you do, everything will make sense." Sarah felt a wave of emotion rise in her chest. She wanted to walk away, to leave it all behind, but something told her that she couldn't. Not anymore. "What if I don't want to know?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Luca's eyes narrowed, but there was no anger in them, just a calm certainty. "You already know deep down, and you can't change that." Sarah looked down at the necklace in her hand again. It felt heavier than it ever had before. She knew she had no choice now. The truth was out there, and she was about to find it. But was she ready for what it might mean? Sarah sat there, the pendant in her hand feeling heavier with each passing second. Luca's words echoed in her mind, louder now than before. "You need to remember, Sarah. You need to face the past that was stolen from you." It was all too much. The life she thought she knew, the past she thought was hers, was suddenly unraveling before her eyes. She didn't know if she was ready for it, but somehow, she knew she couldn't turn back. "What happened to my family?" she asked, her voice trembling, though she tried to keep her composure. Luca stepped closer, his gaze intense, as if measuring her every word. "Your family has been hiding the truth from you for a long time, Sarah," he said, his voice low, almost as if speaking in a secret shared only between them. "Your mother, your father, they weren't who you thought they were." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She didn't know if she wanted to hear more, but something deep inside urged her to ask. "Who were they, then?" she whispered, the words barely escaping her lips. Luca took a deep breath and looked out the window for a moment, as though searching for the right words. "They were part of a world you've never known. A world where power, secrets, and loyalty define everything. Your family wasn't just some ordinary family. They were tied to this world, the world I'm part of." Sarah's heart began to race. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You're saying they were involved in the Mafia?" she asked, the question coming out more as a statement than a real question. Luca nodded slowly, his gaze unwavering. "Yes, Sarah. Your family was involved in this world. But they wanted out. They tried to escape. And they did, at least for a while. But some things, some pasts, you can't outrun." Sarah felt a wave of confusion and disbelief wash over her. "But that doesn't explain anything," she said, her voice growing frantic. "I don't remember any of this. I don't remember my parents being anything but normal." Luca's expression softened, just for a moment, before he spoke again. That's because they erased it all. They erased everything about you, Sarah. Everything about their past. You were kept in the dark. They wanted to protect you, to give you a normal life. But now, that past is catching up with you. The weight of his words sank in. She had always felt like something was missing, like there was a piece of her history that she couldn't quite reach. Now, it seemed like that missing piece was finally being revealed, piece by piece, and it was far darker than she could have imagined. "Why didn't they tell me?" she asked, her voice small. Luca looked at her, his eyes searching hers, as if weighing how much truth she could handle. "Because they loved you, Sarah. They wanted to keep you safe. But the truth always finds a way to come to light." Sarah's mind was spinning. She had spent so much of her life trying to survive, trying to make it on her own, only to discover that her entire existence had been built on a lie. A lie that had been carefully constructed by the very people who were supposed to protect her. "So what now?" she asked, her voice steadying as she looked up at Luca. "What do I do with all of this?" Luca's expression grew more serious, his gaze never leaving hers. "Now you learn the truth. You face what your family tried to hide, and you decide what to do with it. But know this, Sarah," he said, taking a step closer. "You're not in this alone. You have me now, and I won't let you walk away from this. Whatever you decide, I'll be here." The words hit Sarah harder than she expected. She didn't know if she should feel comforted or trapped. But one thing was certain, Luca was right. She couldn't turn back. Her life, her past, had changed forever. And no matter how much she wanted to run, she knew she had to face whatever was coming. The truth was waiting for her, and it was about to change everything. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision pressing on her chest. "All right," she said, her voice steady now. "I'm ready." The night was quiet, the kind of silence that felt heavy and all-encompassing, like the calm before a storm. Sarah stood by the window of the penthouse, looking out over the city. The lights twinkled below, a stark contrast to the dark, twisting thoughts in her mind. She hadn't been able to shake the weight of everything Luca had said. It felt as if her life had been a carefully constructed facade, and now that facade was crumbling, piece by piece, revealing a truth she wasn't ready to accept. She glanced at the pendant resting on her palm, its cool surface a constant reminder of the past that was no longer hers to ignore. Luca's words still echoed in her mind, asterisk. "You're not in this alone. You have me now." Asterisk, the thought of facing her family's dark past was terrifying, but somehow, Luca's assurance had given her a small flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to make sense of it all. What did it mean? The question kept gnawing at her. She had always been told that her family was ordinary, that her mother had died in a car accident and her father had struggled with his own demons. But now, Luca was telling her that it was all a lie, that her family had been involved in something far deeper, something she hadn't known. Sarah turned away from the window and faced Luca. He stood by the door, his presence imposing yet strangely comforting. His gaze softened when he saw her, but there was no mistaking the seriousness in his eyes. "You're ready," he said simply. It wasn't a question. She nodded, even though she wasn't entirely sure if she was. "I don't know what I'm supposed to be ready for," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. Luca took a step toward her, closing the distance between them. "You're ready to face the truth, Sarah. To see who your family really was, and who you really are. You've been living in the dark for too long. It's time for the light to shine on your past." Sarah's heart raced in her chest. The words felt like a promise, but they also felt like a sentence. Was she ready? "What happens after I know?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Luca's gaze hardened, but there was a tenderness in his tone. After everything changes. You'll have a choice to make. A choice? She repeated, her voice laced with confusion. What kind of choice? Luca didn't answer immediately. He stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. The kind of choice that will define your future. You'll have to decide whether to embrace who you really are, or to walk away and pretend it never happened. Sarah felt the weight of his words settle in her chest. It was a decision she wasn't ready to make. Not yet. But somehow, deep down, she knew that the moment of truth was approaching, and when it came, there would be no turning back. She reached for the pendant, her fingers trembling as she held it tightly. The weight of it seemed to anchor her to something solid, something real. It wasn't just a necklace. It was a key to the past. A past she had never known, but one that was calling her. She looked up at Luca, her mind racing. I want to know the truth, she said, her voice steady despite the fear that lingered in her chest. Luca nodded, a slow, approving smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Then it's time. He extended his hand to her, and for the first time, Sarah didn't hesitate. She took it, knowing that this was the moment her life would change forever. The moment she would step into a world she hadn't known existed, and there would be no turning back. The truth was waiting for her, and she was ready to face it, no matter what it would cost her. The room was still, the only sound the soft hum of the city beyond the penthouse windows. Sarah stood beside Luca, her heart racing, a whirlwind of emotions swirling inside her. She had made the decision, the choice that would change everything. She had chosen to face the truth. Luca didn't say a word as he led her down a long corridor to a door at the end. The weight of the moment hung heavily between them, and Sarah could feel the tension building in the air. Each step felt like a step toward an unknown fate. When they reached the door, Luca paused, turning to her with a look that was both intense and reassuring. Are you sure? He asked, his voice soft but carrying a weight that made her pause. Sarah nodded, her throat tight with a mixture of fear and anticipation. I'm sure, she said, though her voice barely registered as a whisper. Luca opened the door slowly, and the moment she stepped inside, everything around her seemed to change. The room was dimly lit, but what caught her attention immediately was the wall in front of her. It was covered in photographs, old, black and white pictures of men and women, many of them familiar in a way she couldn't quite place. Her breath caught in her throat as she recognized faces she had seen only in passing, faces of her parents, smiling and laughing in pictures she had never seen before. But these weren't just any pictures. They were pictures of a life she hadn't known, a life that had been hidden from her, locked away in the shadows of her past. She turned to Luca, her eyes wide with confusion. What is this? She asked, her voice trembling. Luca stepped forward, his gaze never leaving the photographs. This is your family's history, he said quietly. The history they tried to erase, to keep you safe from. But you can't escape the past, Sarah. It's part of who you are. Sarah felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She had never seen these pictures before. Her parents, the people she thought she knew, had been involved in something far deeper, far more dangerous than she could have imagined. It wasn't just a family with secrets. It was a family that had been part of a world where power and loyalty were everything. Luca turned to her, his eyes steady. Your mother wasn't just a woman who died in a car accident, he said, his voice filled with a quiet intensity. She was someone who made choices that led her into this world. And your father, he tried to protect you, tried to shield you from it all, but he couldn't. None of us can escape who we are. Sarah looked at the pictures again, her mind racing. She saw her mother, younger, more vibrant, standing next to men who looked as though they belonged in a different world. A world she didn't understand, but one that had been part of her family's life. This This is who they really were? She asked, her voice breaking. Luca nodded slowly. Yes, he said. But that's not all. You are a part of this, Sarah. This is your heritage. And it's time for you to accept it. Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. She wanted to deny it, to turn away from the truth that was staring her in the face, but she couldn't. She knew deep down that Luca was right. She couldn't run from her past, from the truth of who her family had been. The weight of it all settled on her shoulders, and she felt the full force of the choices that lay ahead. She had always thought she was just Sarah Williams, a woman with a simple life and a simple past. But now, that past was gone, replaced by a new reality, one that would force her to confront the life she had never known. What do I do now? She asked, her voice barely. A whisper. Luca looked at her, his eyes softening for the first time. Now you make your choice, he said. You can walk away, pretend it never happened, or you can embrace the truth and take your place in this world. But whatever you decide, know that you're not alone. I'm with you, Sarah. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Sarah felt the weight of them sink into her soul. There was no turning back now. The truth had found its way to her, and no matter what she chose, her life would never be the same. She took a deep breath and turned back to the pictures, staring at the faces of the people who had shaped her life without her knowing. It was time to face her past. It was time to find out who she really was.